Hi, I'm Andrea Futrell, and I'm here with Mike Futrell to talk to you about the first cave expedition to the East Shan state of Myanmar. We're recording this presentation for the 2020 NSS Virtual Convention International Exploration Session. We're going to the country of Myanmar, and in this case, we're in the Eastern Shan state, which is very close to the borders of Thailand and Laos. This area is known as the Golden Triangle. Myanmar has some amazing karst, which you can see there on the left. Karst zones are the dark zones. Unfortunately, Myanmar also has continued strife with ethnic minorities, and these areas tend to overlap where the karst areas are. We were interested in going to this area back in 2016, but we were not able to negotiate permission at that point. When you go on these expeditions, you always want to have an understanding of local politics, what the active conflicts are, and then you'll also notice an additional hazard in these same areas are landmines. But this year we decided to come in from Thailand and see how it would go in the Eastern Shan State.
Okay, so you've looked at where all the limestone is. You sorted out some of the local, regional conditions, visitation possibilities, but you still don't want to fly around the world until you have cave targets, some idea of where you're going. We'll all spend a great deal of time looking at Google Earth, picking out probable areas. I also do a lot of geospatial analysis, looking at various available data sets, generating models, looking for large domains and sinking rivers. Obviously, you want to target a place, and before flying around the world, you need to have some idea of what you're looking for, where you're going, if you're looking for original exploration. So off we went. Flew into Bangkok, then flew up to Chiang Rai and took a bus over to Mae Sai up on the North Thai border and walked across the bridge to Tachalik. And this is a reasonable area. Tourists go across here all the time. This little corner of Myanmar is open for tourists, at least in the immediate vicinity of Tachalik. But we were going a little bit further north than that. We immediately met by the Myanmar team. Um, Main person is Nini Ang. He is from Yangon, coordinates the Myanmar Cave Documentation Project, is an excellent caver and climber, all around wonderful person, speaks perfect English. We also have Mr. Mo, who's joined many of the cave expeditions and has the van. He serves both as a translator and a general um, facilitator things. Being a new area, we also hired a local guide and liaison, more familiar with the East Shan and the townships where we would be caving and staying. We spent 3 days in the town of Techalik working out permissions, talking with the ministries of tourism, the immigration department, and numerous Buddhist monks and monasteries. The head monks have a great deal of say in what goes on in the area, so you're definitely going to want to talk with them as well as all the governmental officials. And turns out the cave we were going to was actually on a monastery property, so that made it even more that we had to talk to a couple of these gentlemen. during that time, we stayed in Techelek, did some driving around, a little bit of touristing, and found, heard about a couple of smaller caves, and we went out and mapped a couple of those, ones shown here. We were quite happy the first day we were able to get underground because at that point we almost felt like we'd accomplished something in that we had the first cave map in East Shan State. The Myanmar Cave Documentation Project is an international effort. Dozens of people from around the world have participated. Our trip comprised Nini, the local or Myanmar caver. We had Dominique from Germany. Pete and Fleur have been coordinating the British trips, and of course myself, and we're always accompanied by one or several monks from the local monasteries where we were caving. This is what we had at the end of the trip, the largest find we had. And, you know, being in a distant and difficult area, a couple of things we always keep in mind when we're uh, going on a project like this is, you know, it's difficult to get there. Sometimes things work great, sometimes they don't. In any case, you have plane tickets, you have very limited time, uh, how much you're going to be able to spend. And you have to think, you know, for whatever reason, you may never get back. So you want to make the best of your time. Everybody's put a lot of money and effort into developing a project of this nature. So the goal is to be as productive as possible, and I'll talk about that a little bit and maybe have some fun with it. We surveyed approximately 11.6 kilometers in the Somhain cave with, generally we were breaking into two teams with our six cavers, and we just had 9 short days in order to work on this project. And it did become the longest cave known or documented in Myanmar. So this is our story.
The first kilometer or so of the cave is really an extension of the monastery. There's a spectacular temple entrance that we went in and out every day. There's a paved path with paved stones and sometimes just concrete. There are many, many statues of the Buddha throughout the cave. There's a spectacular reclining Buddha near the entrance. And then there were other installations representing some stories in the Buddhist tradition. We particularly liked this dragon boat, and it was also dedicated to the main monk for the area. There were, they put the Buddha statues in every possible little alcove you could imagine. Same thing for the stupas. And there were also these creatures, which by far have to be the most fabulous creatures I have ever seen in a cave. So you just stroll on down the path. We tried to take our time through this area uh, to the point where the monks were concerned that we weren't really seeing the cave because we'd only seen the first mile and a half, or excuse me, kilometer and a half. But we were trying to do a good job of documenting this, assuming that they might want a good map for other purposes. And we're back to my friends there who or the spectacular animals, whatever they happen to be. You also see in the upper right corner, there are lots of mats on the floor. The monastery and the monks would come in the cave, sometimes just for a couple hours, sometimes for as long as a week or two, for prayers and meditation. Luckily, we had several sketchers for the trip, so Nini was able to help on one team, Mike was on another team, and Fleur and Pete on the third team.
So I was inventing quite a lot of new symbols on this trip. Not only that, but also recording where we were taking pictures and indicating how this all fit together so I could put together a map of this nature. I kind of envisioned this right on the very first day that we would create something of this nature because this would be a presentation map that they may want to have, or just thought it'd be fun if we can give this to the folks there at the monastery. Um, but this is still not quite finished, as you see at this point of our recording. Um, but this is just a portion, as you can see with the little inset map. Um, and of course, every day we come back and enter our data at dinner time. We all had little laptops and so on. We would typically use Caveware to type in our data because that allows us to export to other formats. We'd pop it out to ServX and then open our line plots really to visualize and play around because several people were much more familiar with ServX than some other possible things. Um, Here's a table of the final tallies and something I thought, after the fact, I put together and realized, each trip we're in there surveying so much, but we weren't staying at the monastery, so there's a little bit of drive in the morning and in the evening. Um, Gave us very short time periods, so we had to be very efficient and productive as we went through. Number of hours we actually had to do the surveying was, small compared to what you might typically think. But sum it all up, and per team, seemed to be running, in retrospect, about 149 meters an hour. So that's not bad for a cave survey team. Of course, the passage was just stunning beyond the monastery portion. Mostly very large, dry paleo boreholes, very easy to travel, very well decorated, typical of the tropic, subtropic areas, lots of big formations. Boulder hopping, um, we were typically doing 20, 30 meter survey shots. I don't really like to sketch too much over 30 meters unless I need to change scales or something. Very friendly cave. Being part of a monastery, you'd expect, and also being in Asia, most everything uh, had been explored that we saw. There's some areas as we got further into the cave, there was only one or two discernible footprints. So a lot of it was new-ish, not well um, explored. The monks did tell us which way some of the passages went, which went the farthest. Of course, we're trying to map everything. Just some fabulous scenery, going through the passages.
So once again, you get to the end of the day, everybody's exhausted trying to get the data back into the computer again. We have our little theme song, data, 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 you made me out of K. And we would take turns with the laptop entering data. And Mike Futrell decided he really needed to look at, if you take the time to stop and eat, he thought that we had lost 15 minutes per trip. And that meant that we couldn't survey 500 more meters of cave. And if we had not snacked, would have brought our individual team average to 155 meters per hour. So back at the cave, we had mapped the upper level and the area that was more visited as part of the monastery, but we continued down a small passage that led to the next level down, which was a little bit wetter, although there was no active stream, and we just called this the lower level borehole. Really spectacularly eroded rocks. It made walking a little bit difficult, but it was a really beautiful passage, really interesting to think about from a geology perspective. Some areas were a little bit easier going. It's interesting that even at this level, we know that it floods. You can see these sand banks to the left there, but you still had beautiful formations. Once again, some more of those scalloped floors, and the picture on the lower right is where we turned around because we just didn't have time. So that's a lead for the next time. So this was a celebration day back at the restaurant where we realized after we had tallied up data that we now had the longest cave in the country. It was very fun.
So we're all really excited about having the longest cave, and of course we left off with lots more going. But then if we look at the team, and instead of surveying, it's photos. Estimate 1 minute per photo, look at our camera rolls, run that into my little spreadsheet, and I find that that amount of time extrapolated, we probably lost another 1.5 kilometers of potential survey because people are playing with the cameras. Not that that's not a bad thing. You see here in the chart, towards the end of the trip, we were trying to get some photos. This does bring our individual team average to about 171 meters per hour of actual time spent being productive on the map. More passages in the lower level, very well decorated. Really a joy to cave in this area. There's a couple obstacles going towards the lower level. There's one little flowstone nuisance drop that we rigged with a cable ladder. Um, Further downstream, there was a lake that Pete and Fleur took an inner tube to float across. Not sure what they would find. The continuing spectacular, highly eroded limestone floors. Pete's team did pop out another entrance at the lower end as downstream. Appears that there's a slight little stream coming in here, but during the monsoon times, it appears that water ejects and it's a resurgence during high water flows. So they were quite happy as we had found this on the surface or been shown this on the surface a few days before and thought it was possibly a different cave. So that was quite fun. Wrapping up the project, looking at our accumulated inefficiencies, we probably could have had another couple of kilometers. But you think, what if we'd had a biologist along or any number of other people? Pretty soon you don't have a survey trip. So I'm just being fun with the statistics, kind of emphasizing a point at the beginning that on an expedition, you really are focusing everything is coming to just this trip and the few days you have out in the field. And now here it is, 2020, the year of COVID-19, and all expeditions around the world are just about canceled. So the idea of making the best of it when you're on site working a project really comes home because you just don't know when the next opportunity will present itself. I also want to mention that all that said, you want to maintain a very high quality. Don't want to do things a second time. The next trip, you're going to have the same goals. You don't want to be fixing errors. So I hope you enjoyed a little bit of my humor tossed in here. We, of course, want to thank everyone in East Shan, the Ministries of Tourism, Immigration, all the monks at the monasteries that helped us out. Their hospitality was phenomenal, constantly wanting to feed us and help us. Our guide and interpreter in the Techlik area, Stephen, of course, Mr. Mo, the driver, um, and all the friendly and generous people we met throughout the trip. It's a wonderful country, really friendly people. This is our group at the end. Nini wanted to do a portrait of us, so I'm going to use that as the last one. He's a great photographer. You can find a little more at myanmarcaves.com, and that's all we have.